We took a little bit of a hiatus, but we are back to wrap up Season 7 with Season 7, Episode 5, Eastwatch. We're crazy to think that we're already into the second half of the season, but again, this is a shortened season, so we're kind of used to it. And all I'm going to say for this one is, oh boy, this is where the problems start to rear their ugly heads. Pat, what have you got to say before we get started?
Hey, listen, Dom, I think you and the Talking TV family that's Talkin Thrones with us here tonight can agree that this is really should have been called Baelish Watch because, oh man, he's creepily sitting in that corner watching Arya find messages in his room. They got some weird cat and mouse game going on, and that's just just the beginning of the
cherry on top of the ice cream. Yeah, like it's a really weird scenario here where they're like, oh, Littlefinger's just in full-on stalker mode now. All of that and more on today's episode of Talkin Thrones. All right, people, even though in the listening Spotify world that it will seem as if no time has passed at all because this episode will only have been released a week after the previous week's episode, but just to clue you guys in, we are back after a little bit of a week hiatus. We didn't record any episodes last week. Myself and Pat are back. We're ready to break down the final 10 episodes, or 9 episodes, I should say, for you guys of Talkin Thrones. We're kicking it off with Season 7, Episode 5, Eastwatch. Pat, this is... Oh, my feelings on this last stretch for Season 7 is so conflicted because on the one hand, there's still a lot happening. They're in the middle/climax mode. They're getting ready to go towards the end of the season and set up for inevitably, some of the final conflicts that we're finally going to hit in the last couple seasons. So there's a lot of stuff that needs to be happening every single minute in these episodes. These are when the episodes started to get a little bit longer. I believe that every episode from here on out is over an hour long. But there's pulse pounding, crazy stuff happening every 5 minutes. So it definitely makes use of the time well. But I feel like the thing that the internet criticized this season for specifically that I was kind of in favor of when we first started the season, I feel like we're starting to kind of crash into a wall a little bit because I feel like what happened is that Benioff and Weiss, by nature of them trying to obey the laws of the season that they'd set up, where this was clearly going to be a much more fast-paced and much more dire season, I feel they kind of ran themselves a little bit into a corner here where it's like, okay, we had all this stuff that we set up, but now we've only got this certain amount of episodes that we have to wrap it up. And so naturally, we're going to have to start leapfrogging through some loopholes in order to make things happen the way they should. And while it doesn't all fail, this is definitely where I feel like the problems and the plot holes that were criticized really start to show, at least for this season. I don't know. What's your thoughts on that?
Hey, Dom, I'm not seeing it yet. So far so good. I've enjoyed every episode of the season. In this particular episode, it's what's not to like. It's essentially setting up for the whole meeting of the minds. Like, we got to show Cersei the zombies, and then there's no way she can deny us. So it's setting up that sort of storyline. Everything is about, this sort of Hail Mary plan that Jon has cooked up and gotten Daenerys to sign off on. So, I think things are still moving forward and progressing. And, maybe when we see next week's episode or the week after, I'll have a difference of opinion. But so far, I think the story is at a good pace.
Well, that's kind of, again, what I also wanted to pick your brain on as well is kind of what the ultimate kind of, what let's call it the major climax, at least for the main story, let's call it, right? The war, obviously, the three-way war between Daenerys, Jon, Cersei, everything's kind of built up with Tyrion kind of bringing all the parties together. What that kind of rests on, which is ultimately the mission to go north of the wall and retrieve a solo White Walker soldier to bring back to Cersei. Obviously, again, the execution of the plan, we'll get into that once we hit next week's episode, because that's a whole discussion in and of itself. But I don't know. It's one of those things where it's like, in conception, it's like, was this really the only thing they could have done here? And it's so confusing because I don't think I've ever seen a plot device like this happen before, where it's like, okay, there's kind of literally no other way logistically to make this happen. There is no other way to make Cersei believe in the army of the dead other than showing her a soldier. But at the same time, it's like, like, was it necessary ultimately? You know, because what's ultimately, because I guess where I'm coming from is that in order for Daenerys to ultimately side with Jon and understand that the war with the dead needs to come before the war with Cersei, she needs to see the army of the dead, right? That's all fine and good. She still ends up seeing them when she goes to rescue them in the next episode. So, and it's already become clear that she's already starting to side with Jon. It was established in this episode. I know I'm getting a little bit ahead of myself, but bear with me here. And what's established in this episode is that her hesitancy to help Jon does not come from the fact that she does not believe or is not willing to believe in the army of the dead, but from the fact that she doesn't want to give up Dragonstone as a logistical, let's call it, what's it called? As, oh my God, I keep freaking forgetting the words. She doesn't want to give Dragonstone up as an advantage for Cersei, which I'm like, okay, but here's the thing. If she ends up seeing the army of the dead and she operates from Winterfell with Jon, why does she need Dragonstone to begin with, other than like the emotional attachment? You see what I'm getting at here? As far as it's like the problem, yes, is in the execution, but the problem, there was also like a big problem in its conception to begin with. You know?
Yeah. Well, talking about Daenerys and that being some sort of strategic point for the war. The only thing that's there at Dragonstone is the dragon glass. So,
right.
And that doesn't really factor into the conversations here, the dialogue. It seems like the dragon glass has already kind of been mined.
Right, exactly. By the time Davos and them get back to Dragonstone after this, they already clearly showed that they've mined enough dragon glass and have been ferrying it up to Winterfell in order to support them. So
they drop it from the storyline until obviously they're making the weapons later on. So for the most part, there is no real value to having Dragonstone other than the position to King's Landing, which might allow for some sort of major attack.
Right.
But the fact is, like, Daenerys doesn't really need to take King's Landing right away. She can go to Winterfell. She can basically set up camp in the north. Reestablish her alliances. Like, she already kind of lost Dorne. She lost Highgarden. She could probably figure out a way to weaken Cersei's hold on other areas of the Seven Kingdoms, and really wait it out. And she has the advantage, right? They can't really take on the Dothraki. They can't really fight the dragons. So time is a little bit on her side. In terms of, like, I don't think Daenerys really needs to see the army of the dead. Like, having a confirmation, is going to maybe prolong her decision to back Jon, but she definitely is in his corner based on Tyrion and Davos and just the way that they sort of present themselves. The one major thing here is this plan of, like, let's show Cersei the army of the dead.
Right.
It's like, you got to think, like, okay, well, yeah, she should see, because there is that small, tiny chance that she'll, put her personal ambitions aside and, work for the greater good. But knowing Cersei, I don't think any of them should really expect that to be a high probability.
Especially given what we know of, which is that the minute that she sees them, she just once again backstabs them, where she offers to send the Lannister armies north and then just immediately decides not to, out of nowhere.
Yeah, we know where the storyline goes, but, like, even before that, before she sort of betrays them, she is pretty obvious, the big bad, right? So from a viewer,
she's been pretty well established by this point as the new big bad.
Yeah, from a viewer standpoint, you had Joffrey, and then you had Ramsay sort of doing stuff that was, like, exponentially more evil, and now you have Cersei who basically did domestic terrorism against her own people to get rid of basically Marjorie and what's his face, the High
the High Sparrow.
The Sparrow. So essentially, what has happened is she's willing to go through any length, to torment her enemies. So the audience has no real leg to stand on that she's going to change her mind. So it's almost like a fool's errand. Like, they're going to go across, beyond the wall. They're going to get this zombie. They're going to bring it to Cersei. And I feel like from an audience perspective, I know that she's going to betray them.
Right. Exactly.
So
just based off what we know of them.
Exactly. There's not much tension, in this particular sequence. It might have been good if they tied it to, a little more like, oh, hey, we'll bring this to Cersei's court. And if Cersei doesn't react, the people that are in the court, her closest allies, that might fracture her power because they might be afraid of the zombies.
Right.
So like, if there was a little more like, thought about like how it's going to impact her followers and her, backers, I think that might have made a little more sense story-wise to present it that way.
Yeah, 100%. And the one thing that I'll say too, and how this kind of ties into the opening sequence of this episode as well, which I think is really, really well done, is it kind of works, you're right, in that sense of managing to kind of fracture her powers as far as Jaime going. Because while Cersei is continuing to just sit on her throne, because here's the thing that's established that kind of is the summation of all the points that we've brought up right now, is Daenerys has got all the time in the world because she showed Cersei that despite all the kind of one-ups that Cersei got, taking down her allies one by one, Daenerys still has the ace in the hole, which is the dragons, ultimately, and the Dothraki in this case, because as she showed, she didn't even need the Unsullied. Just with the Dothraki and one dragon, she was able to take out Jaime's entire force. So that's that. That's where Daenerys is kind of sitting. Cersei, on the one hand, right, and the problem ultimately with the fool's errand, as we call it, is the fact that it's kind of tensionless because it's only there to continue to set up for Daenerys' ultimate twist as far as just letting loose, So that's the one thing. But how this kind of ties in with Jaime is the fact that Jaime, because unlike Cersei, actually was up front on the battle lines and actually saw the damage that the dragons and the Dothraki could do up close and personal. Jaime has even more of a reason than Cersei to want to believe any sort of peace offering, as I think is brilliantly established by this opening scene when Bronn fishes him out of the river. They have another comedic back and forth bantering, but I think the thing that stands out is the fact that Jaime finally understands just what they're up against. Obviously it's like he had some certain idea, obviously, but he was still just kind of willing to go along with Cersei, whatever. But now that he's seen them up close and personal, it's like, oh, we're really screwed. Like we realize that like we really have just been like playing around, dancing around, like kind of poking the bear as much as we want. But it's like this was just a small demonstration as far as what happened when the bear wakes up and just takes a claw out. If she turns the dragons and the Dothraki towards him, she's like, and Bronn even says it very eloquently. He's like, you're fucked. There's nothing you can do to take them down, And I think, and so that's really well established right there. And the other thing too that comes from this opening scene is kind of, and this is one where I'm like, it's so weird because I understand what the sequence is trying to do, but it's another one of those things where it's like intention versus what is actually being displayed, which is what they are attempting to set up is Daenerys continuing to go towards the dark side with her ultimately deciding to execute the Tarlys for refusing to bow to her. But as far as being what's demonstrated, all it seems is it's like, yeah, Tyrion is more so just kind of wanting to be sympathetic towards people because for sympathy's sake, when Daenerys, I think very rightfully should be executing them for defying her because that's the only way that she's going to continue to solidify her claim. I personally thought that her actions in this sequence were great, where she literally, obviously, there's a dragon right behind them, but she literally tells everyone, it's like, yeah, I'm not here to be Queen of the Ashes. I'm here to be different than Cersei. So I'm going to give you the chance that Cersei never did. Go home, be with your families, And the Tarlys refused to bow before her, based off of, again, just at this point, pure stubbornness, and they both die as a result of it, So I don't know, like, what's your take on this whole sequence?
I think number one is when Bronn, pulls Jaime out of the pool. He's basically says, hey, I'm the only one that can kill you. You can't, let yourself get killed. You owe me still. So I think there's some good banter back and forth between Bronn and Jaime that really solidifies why we like these characters. And, they are well written. They are well performed. Anytime that Bronn is in the show, like he has a scene in which reinforces what we like about this character. Just the fact that he's that cutthroat that is going to get his money in the end, that he's going to get his status. Everything's focused around that, and somehow he survives these miraculous, things like the dragon. In terms of the Tarlys, like, I definitely, for characters that were introduced pretty late into the show, I think they have a great arc, and it just shows you like the stubbornness of the father, and like the fact that he insisted that his son be a man like him, and that's the reason why he banished Sam in the first place to the Night's Watch. This is the one moment where, like, Senior Tarly here did not want his son to sort of follow in his footsteps. But Dickon was like, oh, hey, no, it's like, I'm the same as my father. You'll have to burn me too. And you could see the reaction on the father's face, and just be like, no, you like, you shouldn't follow my lead in this sample. But he kind of makes his peace with it, and the two of them get burned alive.
Yeah, it's a great scene, I think. Just from top to bottom, beginning to end, dialogue, extravagance, visual. It's great.
I just think the dynamic of the characters, it's like they're not backing down. They are who they are, and Daenerys is not backing down either. There's a certain stubbornness that she has, and it's a recipe for disaster that these two forces are against each other in this moment. And Daenerys obviously is going to win. She has the dragon. She has them prisoner. It's not going to end well for them. But the fact is, they're not going to back down. They're basically to the very end, willing to fight her. And so, hey, the Tarlys could have had Dickon go home, and he could have, ruled his house. But instead, Sam is the only real.
Yeah, Sam is the only male Tarly heir left, and it kind of becomes a little bit confusing when that raises even more questions when he becomes Grand Maester, or the new Grand Maester of in the finale. But like I said, we'll get to that when we get to it. So we have two different options.
Does anything happen to the Tarlys for the rest of the show?
No,
or is that house
nothing. It's literally just Sam, and we see that Sam has actually had another kid with Gilly. That's actually his kid, not little Sam. And then he's just Grand Maester in the finale.
Okay, so they don't mention his father's property and inheritance.
Never. They never mention it ever again.
Right.
This is the last we see of anything of the Tarlys, of Hornhill, of anything. Yeah.
I guess if they ever produce that Jon Snow, sequel show,
I guess we'll find out then.
Yeah, they'll have to spend a couple episodes explaining the real estate market after the throne was decided.
Supposedly that is what Martin is interested in. So we have two different options as far as where we can go, because the rest of the storylines in this episode between Dragonstone, King's Landing, and then once they eventually reach the wall, they do very much coincide and are part of one linear story. So we have two different options here. We can either hit the ancillary storylines that happen in Winterfell and then the Citadel first, and then come back to the rest of the rest of the main storyline, or we can hit the rest of the main storyline now, and then we'll come down to
Dom. We should hit up Winterfell and the Citadel, because those storylines are pretty straightforward and good. Let's get them out of the way, and then we'll hit the meat of the episode
for sure.
Right afterwards,
for sure. So we'll kick it off with Winterfell real quick. Like I said, just primarily more so setup. We don't spend as much time in Winterfell as we did last episode, but the big thing that's kind of being established here is kind of Arya starting to call Sansa on her shit. She walks in on a meeting. The Northern Lords are kind of saying, they're like, yeah, we called Jon king in the North, but now he's gone. You're still here fighting for us and defending us. You should lead us. And again, it is, I think Sansa does crack a pretty funny line later on with Littlefinger, where she's like, yeah, the Northern Lords are like weather vanes. They sway to whatever direction is the strongest. She's like, Jesus, no wonder. It's like, no wonder Jon didn't want to rule, But it's a really interesting thing here where what's being set up is the fact that that Littlefinger realizes that Sansa has got one too many allies that could potentially distract from him being able to rule for her. So he needs to start taking them down one at a time. He tried with Bran last episode. That really didn't work. Now he's like possibly sees an opportunity with Arya, especially seeing like the physical prowess that Arya demonstrated last episode. And so he starts obviously, whispering in everyone's ear. Arya witnesses the conversation later on with him with the Glovers and with Glover and with Royce and all of them.
Yeah,
but
this is the only copy,
right.
the note and all that stuff.
Yes.
It's one of those things that the storyline with Littlefinger is Again, we've talked about it many times where his seemingly perfect understanding of the situation and ability to read the room, in the first couple seasons was amazing. And
Yeah.
now here he is, marching closer to his let's say, finale on the series.
Right.
And essentially he's just kind of losing a step. Like, we know as the audience that Arya has this training and she has this ability of manipulation and being able to hide her identity. She was able to pretend to be Walter Frey for a whole episode, or not a whole episode, but a whole sequence where she ended up poisoning all the males of the Freys. So the fact is, like, they're messing with a perspective shift here, where Arya kind of goes in and finds this note, and whatever the implication is from. I believe this is the piece of propaganda that Cersei forced Sansa
Right.
to
So,
sign.
so the note in question that kind of becomes the subject of speculation that almost becomes again the downfall between Sansa and Arya is the note that Cersei originally had her right to rob way back in season 1 when Sansa was kind of not privy to a lot of the comings and goings behind the scenes and really was convinced by Cersei that her father was a traitor and was attempting to do well on behalf of her family because she naively did not know any better, And now this is going to be the catalyst that Littlefinger uses in order to engineer destruction between them knowing and kind of trying to bring up old wounds and old kind of let's call it disagreements that the sisters had. And he's able to kind of prey off this by witnessing Sansa and Arya's confrontation, which is that Arya is kind of now acting as the one that's calling Sansa on her shit the way that Sansa was with Jon previously, where Arya is now very, I think, not inaccurately critiquing Sansa on the fact that it's like, yeah, we know. She's like, you like the power, you crave it, don't pretend like you don't, it's like, I understand that you're trying to operate in the best interest of our family. I get that. But she's like, and again, this also creates, I'm not saying that Arya is in the right at all either, because her only solution for everyone is just like, yeah, if anybody badmouths our family, just kill them. And she's like, Sansa's like, yeah, we still need these guys, regardless of, because again, we're still not sure whether Sansa entirely believes in the army of the dead, but she's like, well, look, whatever happens, we still need these men, we still need these soldiers, winter is here. So we need these allies. And if we kill every person that badmouths anyone, we're going to lose allies. So it's another one of those things where the Littlefinger of it all is kind of the problem here, but the Sansa Arya dynamic, kind of what's coming from it, I actually am surprisingly not hating it as much as I thought, because I guess what I thought was something that I viewed as pretty petty in the past was now I'm like, no, this is actually like a pretty good demonstration of their respective kind of different views on, like, they both have this moral gray area. They both kind of, for lack of a better word, been destroyed by the world, but they both have such a different viewpoint, where Sansa is much more so the diplomat and wants to play both sides and kind of enjoys the power, versus Arya is much more so, like, again, just to kill everyone that is your enemy and is opposed to you, And they both operate from the same means, but it's kind of the same way. It's like they're diametrically opposed viewpoints, and Littlefinger is definitely exploiting that.
Yeah, I like the dynamic, like you say, between Sansa and Arya, but I think Littlefinger being in this situation, I think the thing that bothers me the most about the storyline is the final reveal, where it's like,
right,
they've been playing,
and I have a thing about that too, because there was a deleted scene that was not included in that final episode at all. And I definitely will say that as good as the dynamic and the building is between this episode and then the next episode, the final episode is kind of where they drop the ball, because them leaving out this one crucial scene, on top of the fact that it's another one of those infamous scenes where it's like, okay, so the deleted scene wasn't actually that good, so was the storyline really that strong to begin with? And then kind of just making the last reveal just a gotcha moment. I don't know. It kind of takes a lot of the air out, but I'll wait until that final episode to reveal what that scene was.
We'll talk to it. Like, if we focus on what happens in this episode, it's a little bit of a cat and mouse game. Arya seems to have the upper hand, but it turns out that Lord Baelish is creeping in the corner.
Right.
And
very clearly deliberately wanted her to find that note, which it's like that shot of him, like, I'm like, could you make it more obvious, him literally coming out of the shadows right where the light hits half his face? It's like, we get it, dude.
It's
like,
it's really stylized. The evil grin on his face is perfect. It's like, it's well played. So they're setting up this dynamic. We understand what's happening. That Lord Baelish is going to try to play the two sisters against each other. Obviously we have the ability, we have hindsight at this point because this is like our third, fourth time through the series. But ultimately, like a lot of the storylines, in the late seasons, it's kind of like, oh, I kind of like this. I kind of like this. Yeah, I kind of don't anymore. It's one of those things where you have to kind of accept it late in the show that the good news is whenever they do wrap the storyline, it's kind of like usually a quick segue into something else.
Right.
So nothing lingers too much. So even if the storyline is not exactly what you wanted, you're moving on to the next storylines, and it's like so the pace it keeps going, and even if you get a little bit of a letdown here and there, more or less, like the show is still pretty solid.
Right. I agree with that 100%. So then moving on to the next of the kind of ancillary storylines we have in this episode, the Citadel. This is actually, ironically enough, it feels like we spent so much time here in the first 3 episodes, but this is actually the last that we end up seeing of the Citadel in the rest of the show, because Sam kind of finally realizes that he's fed up and just with everything going on. But what's so interesting is that you would think that the one biggest catalyst for him leaving is not even mentioned, where you have this, I think a really interesting thing. So one thing that we left out of Winterfell is there's a brief scene with Bran where Bran connects with the Weir Tree and sends the ravens out to kind of see how close the White Walkers are getting to the wall, and he realizes that they're getting pretty close. And once again, it shows that, wow, even though Bran is still the three-eyed raven, he still hasn't learned anything at all, because once again, the ravens get too close, and the Night King just looks up and they scatter instantly. It's like, oh, okay, well, that's what happens when you get too close, So he still hasn't learned his lesson there, but he has to like send letters out to everyone immediately. The letter reaches Jon on Dragonstone, which we'll talk about in a little bit, and the letter reaches the Citadel. And what's interesting is that the Maesters, so this is the confirmation of everything that Sam has been saying since he got to the Citadel, where he's been trying to warn them about the army of the dead. They've given off this myriad of reasons as to why they haven't said anything to the rest of Westeros. They've basically gone on to do something that's like, okay, the wall will keep them out. And he's like, okay, that's fine and all. But this is basic confirmation, like from Bran himself, that it's like, yeah, we don't know if the wall is going to be enough to keep them out. There's a lot of them, and he saw them. And now Sam essentially has the double task of essentially having to explain how a teenage kid is now the epitome of all sorcery and knowledge in the world, and how he himself was the one who helped bring Bran through the wall way back when. And the Maester's reaction to this, rather than heeding Sam's word to send out letters to the rest of Westeros to go north and reinforce Winterfell on the wall against the White Walkers, is, oh, this could also easily be a ploy for Daenerys, for us to leave Westeros defenseless in case Daenerys wants to invade. And I get where they're coming from, because they also have the knowledge that Daenerys just burned Randall and Dick on Tarly, information that they knowingly kept from Sam, which I'll give them the benefit of the doubt. But it's like, what? Like, it's another one of those things where it's like, I feel like we're juggling too many hoops here, Like, there's a string loose here somewhere, and it's going to cause the whole thing to unravel.
No, I think, the Citadel is not going to necessarily jump at Bran's message. Like, Bran has sight beyond sight, right?
Right. We all know how good of a job he does when it comes to explaining that to people.
Yeah, but no one really knows this, and it's like, okay, so maybe Littlefinger has the sense, and Arya and Sansa and anybody that kind of met him at Winterfell can kind of see the, sort of like just shape he's in, the fact that he's talking like a robot, but no one, is going to read a Raven message and completely believe that he is seeing visions that they should take seriously. So the fact is, like, the Citadel has all these books. They have all this knowledge. They're not seeing the warning signs that they need to see. And Sam, is upset because it's like his expectation going to the Citadel was that there's all this information that you would just be working around the clock, nonstop, trying to track down exactly what the solution is to get rid of the White Walkers. And that's not what happened. It's like, it's life as usual. They need the chamber pots cleaned. They need the
Right.
Beef stew made. It's like they just need life to continue the way that it's been going at the Citadel, and they're not necessarily too concerned with the outside world. And I think it's that mentality that Sam really doesn't understand, really can't get on
Right.
board with, and leads him to make his decision.
Well,
Action.
it's a big
Bran
difference.
said it. This has to be taken care of. So
Right.
you know what? Sam is now gonna stop. Just cleaning dishes, and he's gonna go do something.
Well, it's a big difference, obviously, to the life that he was used to. He came from the wall where it was literally life or death every single minute that he was there, and he now kind of comes to this area, even though it's in the place where he grew up. He's been away from there for so long that he kind of has forgotten that, like, yeah, down in the South, which is kind of so far removed from a lot of the harshness that he was exposed to on a daily basis. They're kind of more content with just maintaining the status quo and making sure that happens. Kind of, again, I think it does a really good kind of what old Game of Thrones did really, really well, which was really breaking down kind of the disparities that come with the more elite versus kind of, the regular working class. But if anything, again, Sam's kind of frustration, I should say, that comes from the Maester's refusal to heed his word causes him to overlook a very major important detail that kind of comes out of nowhere. And it's all of a big problem with kind of how he just kind of takes credit for it later on, when it was obviously Gilly that found it, where Gilly, who's helping him transcribe these scrolls, who he's taught to read, and who is proving very, very adept as well, ends up stumbling upon the exact passage that confirms not only, obviously, we knew, obviously, that Jon was Rhaegar and Lyanna's son. Obviously, that was confirmed at the end of season 6, and we didn't think there would be anything more to that. But come to find out there is, because Gilly ends up stumbling upon a passage from a maester, basically dictating an annulment, which is basically the Westerosi term for divorce, that Rhaegar and Elia Martell had an official split. Which confirms that Jon was not, and his relationship with Lyanna was not anything out of wedlock. They were officially married by a septon, which makes Jon not only obviously not just another bastard, but officially the heir to the throne, since he is Rhaegar's legitimate son. And how this piece of information is treated throughout the rest of the show, we'll get to that when we get to it. But I do think it's kind of hilarious how this is one very, very crucial bit of information that is just kind of like thrown in there for just shits and giggles and just overlooked, and then it's just revealed, oh yeah, just happen to find this out in the end.
Well, I think the best part is, like, if I remember correctly, Sam and Bran have a scene, and Bran's like, "You gonna tell him, or should I?" You know what I mean? Like,
I'm pretty sure that happened. I don't remember if it's the wording is exactly that.
No,
but I'm pretty sure that
but
happened.
it's that kind of mentality where
You're 100% right. You're 100% right.
And I can't wait for that sequence, because
it's gonna be so good. It's gonna be so
It's
good.
part of Bran's, like, essence right now.
Right.
He's kind of this, like, guy that creeps around, and he tells people,
Or rather, wheels around creepily, I should say.
Yeah. But he tells them the future, and it's kind of like off-putting at every turn. And in the case with Sam, it's kind of like, well, you gotta step up and give your friend good advice. But for Littlefinger, for Jaime, like, things that Bran says to them, it's kind of creepy.
Yeah. For sure, absolutely. Especially since they are. I'll say that they're obviously older and have not had nearly as much experience with magic and this sort of stuff as I feel like some of the other characters who have more so. I think it kind of tells. Sansa as well, I feel like you could throw in there as well, when he kind of just throws out the bit about seeing her on her wedding night, and you were so pretty in that dress, and I'm like,
oh my God.
Stop, just stop talking. Anyways, but yeah, so that's it for the ancillary stories. So let's get back to the meat and potatoes. Kicking off on Dragonstone, like I said, where we pretty much bounce back and forth between Dragonstone and King's Landing before we kind of wrap up the episode of Eastwatch. So you have Jon walking out as you got obviously this beautiful vista shot of Daenerys flying up at the dragon. The Dragonland's right there. It's again, they're really trying to hammer home the, like, oh yeah, Jon is a Targaryen. I feel this is that episode where that really started, when the dragon comes up super, super close to him and he's able to pet it. Obviously, the thing that's explained off screen is the fact that the reason why the dragon didn't eat him is because it's the reason why Targaryens were able to bond with dragons back in the day. I'm assuming this is something else that they're going to get more so into House of the Dragon as well, is that the thing that allows Targaryens and dragons to bond is the fact that the dragons can smell their blood. And so the reason as to why Drogon lets Jon pet him is because he smells that he is a Targaryen. So that's supposed to be more subtle, cluing us into the fact that it's like, oh, get it? Jon's a Targaryen. And obviously, Daenerys gets off the dragon. They start to have more of a conversations, continuing to bond. It feels like they're going somewhere with this, as far as like kind of, them weighing out like kind of the oh my God, what's it called? the consequences that come with ruling, for lack of a better word. When Jorah walks up, he's back. He's magically gotten back again. Just the conveniences of timing here are just amazing too, as far as what just the amount of just like, wow, characters just happening to be in the right place at the right time here. It is just working so well for them. But it's
in another lifetime, Jorah is Batman. So
that's true. That's true.
He's
Well, in another universe, we should say he is Batman.
Yeah,
so.
If you watch the what is it, the Titans DC show, right? Our actor that plays Jorah, plays Bruce Wayne. So
yes,
which I was very surprised, that's one of his post Game of Thrones roles.
Right.
I was like,
and from what I've heard, he's pretty good on it too.
Yeah, I think he's, listen, I think he is one of the better Batmans. It's fun to watch that show. It's obviously like a couple cameos, so it's not like a major role. But I think he does a pretty good job playing like a fractured Batman.
Yeah.
So anytime that you see actors that kind of were really big in this show kind of move on to other properties or movies or whatever, it's always cool to see them
for sure. But the big thing that's being set up
getting
here,
good roles after this in their career.
Oh yeah. Well, the big thing that's being set up by this scene, and this scene is kind of the kickoff of a few scenes that happen throughout the rest of this episode, is that we're clearly setting up for what I call the Fellowship of the Snow, is what I call, where the next episode we get it's this like combo like Fellowship of the Ring / Avengers getting together, where it's like we're putting all the characters that are like are gonna form this Snowicide Squad, for lack of a better word, that's gonna go north of the wall in order to carry out this fool's errand. And this is the start of it, where Jon and Jorah, again, they've got some shared history, obviously, with Jon, working with Jorah's, obviously, with serving under Jeor Mormont, continuing with the thing that was set up by Sam healing him at the beginning of the season. Then they move to the what's it called? Then you have a brief scene with Tyrion and Varys where they're comparing and they're like, oh, what's it called? Varys is like, oh, she's getting a little bit out of control. You need to convince her that, she needs to do better and all that. Again, just more like hinting at the fact that, like, okay, Varys is eventually going to go against her, blah, blah, blah. And the big thing, next we have the courtrooms, not the courtroom scene, the meeting scene where Jon reads the letter and they officially decide to come up with the plan to go north of the wall. And I think probably the most baffling thing about this plan is that it's not Jon's idea to do this. It's Tyrion's. Tyrion is the one where it's like, Jon is like, I don't think that Cersei's going to come north to see the dead at my invitation. And Tyrion's like, so bring the dead to her. And the first thing that should have been out of anyone's mouth here is, how the hell are we going to go north and get one soldier? Like, I mean, obviously that is said to a certain extent, but I feel like what they should have been saying is, okay, these things come in packs. There's groups of them. You don't just stumble upon one random dead soldier. You'll stumble upon maybe a solo White Walker, maybe. Again, if going based off of what we've seen in the past, anything to go based off of. But the likelihood of running
that was when Craster was handing out the babies.
Right, exactly. But they've never once run into just one undead soldier. There's always been at least, like, going all the way back to season 1, when he's referencing, obviously, them bringing the undead men that they found north of the wall and then bringing them into the wall to examining them and then coming to life and attacking them and killing them and almost killing them. There was still 2 of them. Like, they've never run into more than one at a time. So the likelihood of them surviving this mission is already slim to none as it is, where it's like just weighing the probability of it. It's like, okay, so say that we do this. Say that we go north of the wall. Say that we, it's like, well, the likelihood of us running into one undead soldier, but nobody brings this up. And I'm like, okay, you would think that Jon, the dude who's been talking all season about having seen the Army of the Dead, he doesn't bring this up at all. Everyone else is just kind of like, oh, what a brilliant idea. Why didn't we think of this? And it's like the fact that nobody else is questioning this, and then the fact that Jorah so readily volunteers, it's like, and then by that, I feel like it's Jorah readily volunteering. That's when Jon is like, okay, I kind of have to do this now because this doofus on himself is not going to survive north of the wall, and we got to do something. That's when he's like, okay, well, we could probably get the wildlings to help us because, they'll follow me and all that. And that's when Davos and Daenerys are voicing their opposition. And he's like, I'm going to do this, blah, blah, blah. And it's just like, I don't know, man. But at this point, it's like, all right, the plans have been set. I guess we're going to do this. Okay, this is the thing that's going to happen. And they're like, okay, well, we also would need, and she's like, okay, so the purpose of this is we're going to bring it to the summit. We're going to show the dead soldier to Cersei. And Daenerys is like, okay, well, that isn't going to help if Cersei doesn't stand down. And that, of course, leads to, okay, well, I might be able to get Jaime to get her to, hear us out, and so that leads, obviously, Davos smuggling Tyrion into King's Landing. And so this leads to two major developments. One, obviously, Tyrion meeting with Jaime, which again, despite the kind of loopholes in logic that we're kind of leapfrogging through, I think the scene with Tyrion and Jaime is good. It's not great, but I'll say it's good. You know, these two haven't seen each other in quite a while. I do think it's kind of conspicuous where it's like, wow, Bronn was so easily able to bring Jaime down, and then they have their first interactions, and there's no, like, kind of thing that comes from it.
There's no real build up for this meeting.
It kind of comes out of nowhere.
Yeah, and we're sort of used to, something like this having a couple scenes leading up to the moment where obviously Bronn kind of leads Jaime in. But, they just skip right to the action. We have to take it on faith. All this stuff happened. I don't, again, like, you're not getting a lot of the setup necessarily. You're just getting thrown right into the sequence.
Right.
But it does exactly what it has to. Like, you got to sell this storyline of them grabbing the soldier of the dead and showing Cersei. So the fact is, like, this scene has to take place because otherwise, how are they going to be able to display this zombie? You're going to have some sort of meeting to be able to do this, and brokering it is the only way to do it.
Right. And so they broker the meeting, obviously. They're kind of really only just trading off barbs with one another, and then it kind of results in, okay, Tyrion gets his piece to Jaime. Jaime's able to get it back to Cersei, and so there's two things here. Obviously, first, when Jaime meets with Cersei first, before this whole meeting goes down, and he kind of reveals to her, obviously, kind of what Olenna told him, that it's like, yeah, what's it called? That she poisoned Joffrey, not Tyrion. And so now Cersei has that confirmation. It's like, okay, wow. So Tyrion, who she was hell-bent on finding and having killed for Joffrey's murder not even a couple seasons ago, now has this confirmation. It's like Cersei's looking for somebody to be mad at in this scenario. And if I was Jaime, I would be
she has the right to be mad at Jaime because Jaime's the one that convinced her to let Olenna die a peaceful death. So the fact is, you get that sense that Cersei is like, I could have had, a Doran level revenge against Olenna and really punished her, but you took that away from me. So there is definitely in this sequence a huge amount of tension between the two of them because Cersei, somehow believes that Jaime is more into Tyrion than he is into her. In terms of like willing to team up and like trust them and whatnot. So this could be paranoia on Cersei's part, or this could be just her reading the situation properly. It's one of those things where Jaime's got to make a choice coming up soon.
For sure. And like I said, it's kind of, I think, counterbalanced later on when she sleeps with him. And then, obviously, the servant sees them together, and then he brings her Tyrion's message. And, of course, she already knows because she knows everything because Qyburn is way better, clearly way more effective than Varys ever was in that position of just knowing everything. And what's it called? So, obviously, the point that she brought to Jaime before this whole thing was, okay, well, our choices are either die surrendering or die fighting. I think I know what I'm going to choose. And the thing that she says is she's like, okay, I want to make one thing clear here. The only reason why I'm not having you killed for treason is because this meeting with Tyrion is actually advantageous to us because regardless of what their intentions are, that still buys us a little bit more time, both in order to stave off a full-scale invasion of King's Landing, which even she somewhat admits that they're not ready for, and B, because it will also give us more time to prepare if they do have anything planned. So it's Jaime's decision to meet with Tyrion obviously was both advantageous and not because it prolonged his life a little bit more. But I don't know. Like, I just feel like these constant threats from Cersei, especially since we know that they don't end up going anywhere. She literally has him at sword point, has him at the mountain sword point in the finale. And then when she has Qyburn send Bronn north, that does nothing. And then he ends up coming back to save her at the end. It's like, we all know that, like, yeah, it's empty threats. We kind of know that, like, nothing's going to happen. So it's one of those things that's kind of weird in hindsight. I don't really know how I feel about the constant threats overall. It's like where she is constantly, again, questioning Jaime and putting him under fire. And it's like, he's the only ally you have right now, Like, there's literally no one else. It's like, you're on Greyjoy? Like, that Joker? Like, come on.
Yeah, he's kind of disappeared, but
yeah, he just kind of went off. Like, where is he?
He'll be back at some point. But
right.
The main kind of you know, what is it? Just like it's not a main storyline, but it's kind of like a nice comic
the Gendry
relief
thing?
almost. Yeah, it's Gendry,
Well,
right?
well, real quick, I thought something else really hilarious that I just realized is that I'm like, so wait, since we know that Euron's still in King's Landing, that means that the Iron Fleet have to be circling King's Landing, right? So how I'm like, damn, Davos is a really good smuggler that he's just able to get them in that close to the city and just completely dodge Euron's fleet entirely.
Well,
but,
he made a career on that, and that's why
true.
he's known
So,
as the Onion.
I just thought it was funny, but and then
I
obviously
think you have to, you have to assume that Davos is just that good,
right?
Building to the myth of his character. But
yeah, for sure.
Yeah, I
the
would
biggest
say
thing,
that
Gendry, he's back.
Yeah, it's like Davos obviously has some business of his own, and he goes to the blacksmith shop and he finds Gendry, who's back at his old place. And Gendry is just kind of slipped in. No one's looking for him, and he's just doing his own thing. But like as soon as Davos shows up,
he's like, I'm ready to go.
He's ready to go, and it's like you'll need a sword, and it's like I don't know anything about swinging a sword, but I know about this hammer. And so he's basically Gendry gets an upgrade. He's just swinging a hammer around,
and he's bald now too. And like a couple inches taller and jacked. Like he's like, I was like, wow, he's a man right there. It's like it's so funny. I feel like this whole episode is just like it's like if one of those like wrestling pre-shows where they have like all of like the different wrestlers meeting before they're about to go on stage. And I feel like that's what we're getting here. Where it's like, oh, Jon meets Jorah. Davos is bringing in Gendry. They're about to meet with Tormund later on. And here come these guys. It's like, oh man, like it's literally like I feel like it's like phases like movies 1 through 5 of the Marvel Cinematic Universe all put into one movie,
Yeah, I think Marvel or like the Fellowship of the Rings. I think it's more like that. They're just sort of coming together to do a common goal. But I think Gendry is someone I did not expect to be back in the show.
Right.
Obviously, he's still a bastard of Robert and has, some small claim to the throne, and his storyline never really got perfectly resolved.
Not quite.
So it makes sense that he's back and
right.
that they're going to kind of utilize him for one last push and make sure that storyline gets resolved. So,
right.
It's like a really great moment. It totally makes sense that Davos is the one that kind of finds him, and because Davos probably feels bad. Feels bad what Melisandre and Stannis did to him. So, this is his way of being like, hey, listen, I can't change the past, but I can at least give you purpose. And, Gendry is all for it. And now they just have one more fighter on their side that's going to head up to the wall.
It's interesting because obviously it's another one of the things where in the benefit of hindsight, with the benefit of hindsight, I feel like Gendry is one of many characters where it's like, did he really need to come back? But it's a totally, especially given Benioff and Weiss' track record of just dropping storylines off that just were at one point we thought were going to be important. But it's a good fan service moment. It works out like you said, it was kind of unresolved.
I personally,
fans have been speculating, theorizing. They've even been making jokes for years. It's like, oh, Gendry's still rowing. All the memes that were coming out, and then Davos, to the point where Davos even makes a joke about it. It's like, oh, I thought you'd still be rowing, But
I just never thought that he would be back, and so I think they bring him back, and they just kind of like give him a new attitude. I got this hammer. I'm gonna bash these gold cloaks' heads in. He's not putting up with any BS, and
I'm still so mad whenever somebody introduces a giant hammer like that, and or they're associated with it, and they don't utilize the catchphrase "hammer time." It's just it's a crying shame, I think. But what's it called? Big thing. Davos obviously gets it back. They are able to first bribe.
I'm sorry. I'm just picturing like Gendry saying "hammer time."
Come on.
Cut to credits, and MC Hammer comes on.
Exactly. It's perfect. But so first they have to bribe 2 gold cloaks with shrimp Viagra, I guess is what exactly they're doing before Gendry is like, screw all this, it just kills them both, and it's just hilarious.
Well, it's basically Gendry and Davos are trying to smuggle out. The gold cloaks know what they're doing, and it's like, oh, is the price for a bribe still 5 pesos or whatever it is?
Yeah, five
I
dragons.
forgot what the money is.
Yeah.
I just threw in there the But
Well, I've been watching too much Better Call Saul lately, huh?
yeah, I think so. But the fact is, um, listen, the price has gone up. I like all the authentic talk. It's like they take the time out to really make you feel that like Davos is a smuggler, and that these are some Flea Bottom like characters that are just bribing the guard. And then here comes strolling in Tyrion, who kind of messes up the whole
Right.
scheme.
And they're like, wait a minute, weren't we supposed to be catching a dwarf a couple of years ago? And I'm like, it's once again just like, how much time has actually passed in between the seasons? It's been a question that's been consistently befuddling me since season 1, where it's like, I feel like it wasn't that long ago that they were looking for Tyrion and like trying to like bring every dwarf's head on to Cersei on a spike, but whatever. They managed to get back to Dragonstone. Jon meets Gendry for the first time. I think they actually have a pretty good banter back and forth where it's like, our fathers knew each other, our fathers fought together. I think that's like a pretty interesting, we're both bastards in some sense, that can actually like get on the same page. I think they have some good camaraderie there. They get ready to ship off. Tyrion has a nice closing moment with Gendry where he gives him the coin that the slavers originally gave to them. I love the thing where it's like, I missed you, Mormont. Nobody quite glowers like you, and he gives him the coin in order to ship them off. Jon gives Daenerys one final farewell where it's like, well, at least you won't have to deal with the king in the north anymore. If what's it called, if we don't make it. And she's like, I've grown rather used to them. They ship off, they head north, they meet with Tormund. Tormund's reaction once they reach Eastwatch is just priceless in general. Where he talks to Davos and he's like, I thought it was your job to talk about his stupid ideas. And he's like, I've been failing at that of late. And he's like, and he asks Jon, he's like, how many queens are there now? And he's like, 2. And he's like, and you need to convince the one with the dragons or the one that has sex with her brother. And he's like, both. Tormund's reaction is just beautiful. And that's where he's just kind of the audience avatar, just trying to figure out the logistics of like, okay, you're actually going to go through this. We're actually going to do this. We're going to take a squad. We're going to go north of the wall and we're going to capture a solo dead man. Like, that's actually happening. And he's like, yeah, it is.
Yeah, and I really like the whole moment where they go into the prison and
you're not the only ones, and it's like, oh, but we got 3 more that are gonna join.
Yeah, and then there's the Hound,
Beric, Thoros, which I want to know what happened to the rest of the guys that were in the Brotherhood that were with them, because there were a couple other guys that were with them in that first episode, and now it's just these 3. Like, what happened to the rest of those guys?
I think there was Sam and Frodo. They're looking for the plate, to throw the ring in. It's 2 separate missions.
Yeah, maybe. I don't know. But look, so they have some banter, some back and forth. They all know each other. They've all had interactions with the past. Gendry, obviously, he brings up the shit with the Brotherhood that they did with him in the past. Jorah knows Thoros because they fought together on Pike. Tormund realizes that Jorah is Jorah Mormont's son. And Beric is like, oh, wow, look at all of us. Here we all are. Same time, same place, going to the same... And the Hound is like, shut the fuck up. Like, I'm done, sick and tired. That was one of the funniest inserts where he's like, just giving another, like, spiel sermon. And the Hound's like, just shut up. Are we coming with you or not? And then they finally realize, like, Jon's like, well, yeah, we are all on the same side. We're all breeding. It's a little bit of a flimsy excuse, but like that ending shot where it's just the 7 of them all standing in that one pose, and then they all walk out in the V formation. I'm like, this is so spectacularly stupid. It's incredible. I'm like, the Fellowship of the Snow, the Snowside Squad, Game of Thrones Avengers, like all the above. I'm just like, and as they're walking literally into the unknown as they fade off as the snow envelops them.
I think it's one of those things where it's the great coming together of like fan favorite characters.
Right. It always works. It is inherently satisfying, but like I don't know. I feel like there's just so much else behind it that kind of ruins it in hindsight. But
yeah, I don't know. We'll see what happens. It kind of leaves us off for a good episode. We know that this group is going to be facing the Night King. So, that's what we have to look forward to. It's like, I can't wait for next week's episode of Talkin Thrones because
for sure.
I'm going to fire up that episode. I'm going to see it again and, just enjoy it, just enjoy it. Because it's not exactly a great moment for, Jon and Daenerys and company.
Yeah, it's kind of a big loss. Again, they ultimately achieved their goal, but to what cost? Exactly. Yeah, Beyond the Wall. That's gonna be one that since we started this recap series, I've been waiting to recap since minute 1 because again, it's one of those ones where there's so much great stuff in it, but again, certain of the plot mechanics where it's like, how did this happen? But like I said, that's a conversation for next week's. In the meantime, that was it. That was a recap of season 7, episode 5, Eastwatch. A lot of stuff that happened, but again, we managed to crunch all that out in still under an hour. Man, if that doesn't show what efficient podcasters you are, then I don't know what does. But Pat, where can the good people follow you in the interwebs?
Hey, listen, at this point, Instagram at Patrick W. Huber. That's my handle. Just I'm posting things willy-nilly whenever I feel like it. So just find what I have there.
All right, sounds good. And of course, you can follow me at Movie Nerd Reviews across all platforms. Be sure to follow the official Talkin TV podcast across all platforms: Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, TikTok, all of the above. Be sure to subscribe to us if you're watching us on YouTube. Be sure to follow us on Twitch. New episodes of Talkin Thrones are uploaded every single Friday on Spotify and Apple Podcasts. And as always, people, 12 seasons in a short film, and watch more fucking movies. See you guys next time.